Our main character, Freon Starlight, was a hero who sided with the Demon King and chose to destroy the world.
After his grim task was complete, he presented the legendary hero's sword to the Demon King, who called him a wretch for slaughtering his family and his lover at her own request. This horrifying path was the only way for Frey to become her subordinate. Seeing how useful he was, she acknowledged his power and granted his wish. Deep down, he knew it was the only path he could take. One by one, he had massacred his so-called comrades, even the kingdom's princess who stood against the demonic forces. With their dying breaths, his former allies cursed him, their trust shattered into bitter regret. Yet his lover, Serena, accepted her fate, confessing her love for him was unconditional, no matter what. The Demon King praised his actions and told him to destroy the blade, but she was stunned when he drew the sword, revealing his intent to die and take her with him. This was the solitary road only he could walk, to save the world and the loved ones he'd already lost. After the final clash, Frey awoke, finding himself much younger. He realized he'd been sent back in time to the day before he enrolled in the academy. He checked the system interface and saw he had been granted the title, Path of the Villain. By fulfilling his mission and dying with the Demon King after killing his friends, Frey had unlocked the hidden route. This time, he swore he would save everyone. About 10 years ago, long before Frey entered the academy, he asked his father about the meaning of the winding rune-like letters on a paper he held. The old man told him they were called Kania. He explained that only those who inherited the bloodline of the hero clan, Starlight, could read them. That's when Frey realized his father was talking about the letters written throughout the ancient books. In response, the man silently led Frey to an entrance and told the boy to go inside alone. Curious, Frey asked him why. The old man told him he had to be strong, because of the prophecy concerning the hero of their lineage. The one who vanished with the Demon King after defeating the evil ruler. The prophecy stated the Demon King would reappear after 1,000 years, and not only that, a new hero destined to save the world would also be born. But that was only the part of the prophecy known to the public. The rest foretold that both the Demon King and the new hero's successor would appear in the current era. As the weight of the words sank in, Frey was ushered into a dark room, and the door was slammed shut. The boy immediately screamed and pounded on the door like any normal child would. But then he noticed a soft light. He followed the glowing trail and came upon the legendary hero's sword. He tried to touch it, but a holographic figure suddenly appeared, warning him not to, frightening the boy. Frey demanded to know the figure's identity, and the man revealed that he was Frey's ancestor. At first, Frey doubted him, since the statue of the great hero was incredibly handsome, a comment that angered the legendary spirit. The man then asked Frey if he had come to learn how to conquer the world. But Frey replied that he came because his father said it was how he could protect the people he loved. His reasons sounded much like the hero's own. He told Frey that the current world was headed for a fate far worse than a simple bad ending. These terms confused the poor boy. So the hero placed his palm on Frey's face. Instantly, the boy witnessed visions of demons destroying the world, as his ancestor explained that this was its destiny if he chose the wrong path. After seeing himself lose everyone he loved in the trance, Frey collapsed to the ground, gasping for air. The hero simply remarked that the first vision is always the hardest. With tears in his eyes and determination in his heart, Frey swore an oath, just like his ancestor, that he would protect everyone he loved. The hero of the past nearly forgot that Frey was his successor, seeing so much of himself in the boy. So he promised to teach Frey the path he needed to walk to protect everyone he cherished. He repeated the process by placing his hand on the boy's head, warning him that it would not be an easy path, for Frey would have to destroy the world with his own hands and die with the Demon King. Only then could he unlock the hidden route and see the new trials that awaited him. He hoped the boy would not lose heart. In the present timeline, 10 years later, Frey noticed that everything had progressed just as he remembered. The only thing different was the presence of the system. While waiting for the system to update, Frey realized this new ability would be invaluable for the future he now had to face. He compared it to what he had seen in the Book of Prophecy as a child, realizing he could now overcome his first trial based on what his ancestor had shown him. If he could master this system, he could finally protect everyone. Just then, Kania knocked on his door. Frey smiled and told her to enter, believing he could finally relax a little with her. After all, it had been a long time since he had seen her smile. Just as the system finished updating, it warned Frey of an approaching presence. And in that exact moment, Kania entered, as the system informed Frey that the 5 main heroines still retained their memories from the previous loop. That's when he knew he was in serious trouble. The system's rules were designed to ensure that Frey, playing the part of a false villain, had to continue his despicable acts to earn points. And if his good deeds were ever discovered, his life force would be drastically reduced. He currently had about 100 points, which he could use to purchase necessary items or skills. After warning Frey about the heroine's awareness, the system initiated an emergency activation. The result left Frey utterly shocked, and from the death glare Kania gave him, he could feel her overwhelming killing intent. She was his childhood friend, cursed from birth with dark magic that drained her life force, and one of the 5 main heroines from the prophecy. Now that she remembered everything, Frey feared Kania could kill him at any moment for how cruelly he treated her in the past. Kania then asked if he was hungry, so he ordered her to bring him the usual. She glared at him before leaving to follow his command, and he panicked, knowing she was out for his life. And so he decided to brace himself for her coming revenge. Suddenly, the system popped up, notifying him that it had detected a powerful killing intent nearby. This was thanks to an innate skill that detected one life-threatening danger per day. Frey tried to logically deduce why Kania would want to kill him now. He noted she couldn't possibly get away unscathed if she tried, but just then, she opened the door, and he could feel death radiating from the bowl she carried. He realized she must have cursed the food with dark magic, intending to send him to an early grave. Frey knew he was cornered, so he decided to fully commit to his villainous role. He did this by screaming at her for bringing soup, claiming he wanted a sandwich, before hurling the plate against the wall near her. By acting wicked, he earned a single false villain point. Seething with hatred, Kania stormed off to make his sandwich. A few minutes later, she returned with a bizarre-looking sandwich. To her shock, he told her it had no cheese, so she'd better remake it. Kania tried to argue, but Frey brazenly challenged her for daring to talk back to him. As a result, she backed down, only to return with another sandwich, but this time he told her the bread was too dry. Frey made her redo it several times, and by the 8th attempt, she stumbled while holding the sandwich she had carefully poisoned. He saw just how persistent she was, realizing Kania had repeatedly remade it, infusing her magic into each one until she was completely exhausted. He took the sandwich and pretended as if he was about to eat it. This made Kanya's eyes light up with anticipation, but then he tossed the sandwich aside, saying he'd rather have the soup from earlier. When he ordered her to remake it, Kania collapsed, but he caught her, realizing how cruel fate was for not allowing him to smile with her. For just a moment, he laid her on his bed, noting that earning false villain points was far more life-threatening than he'd ever imagined. Seeing how dangerously low Kanya's mana had become, Frey supplemented her cursed body with his own life force. He knew it was the only way to stabilize her dark magic, as he himself wouldn't live much longer. He concluded that filling her with his life force was the only path forward. After doing so, Frey wondered how to escape his ridiculous situation, because there was no way he could proceed with his original plan. He recalled that for the next 2 months, before the main quest began, he had planned to lay low and prepare in secret without revealing his true identity, but with the current situation, that was no longer an option. He had no idea how to tactfully deal with the 4 remaining heroines he had yet to meet. Frey prioritized the order of their encounters, noting that Serena, his fiancée, didn't require immediate attention. On the other hand, Princess Kania was a Forsaken royal with no power to oppose him, so she wouldn't cause him any trouble. This was unlike Fair Loche and Irina, whom he would constantly run into at the academy. In Loche's case, she was an innocent pawn of the church who could socially ruin him with her powerful backing. But Irina was the greater threat, being reckless and impulsive. This meant she could kill him on the spot without a second thought. Kania was also in a helpless position, since her younger sister was a hostage, but Frey had to collect false villain points regardless of the risk, so he would have to provoke her even more. He realized the number of points he could gather from Kania was limited, so it was best for him to earn riskier points by interacting with the other heroines. Now armed with the information from the Book of Prophecy and his past life, Frey planned to sort everything out the next day and prepare for the real battle. Starting after his school admission, Frey ended up studying the Book of Prophecy until the dawn of the next day. He glanced back at the sleeping girl, then lifted her from the bed and set her down on the cold floor. After a quiet sigh of relief, he roared at her, scolding her for oversleeping. Startled, Kania looked around, realizing she'd fallen asleep in his room. Her gaze pierced through him, searching for any sign of misconduct. But he simply ordered her to prepare the carriage, reminding her it was his first day at the academy. Kania got to her feet and left as commanded. Only then did Frey check his status window, confirming he had 100 points. He sighed. It was far too little. He'd need hundreds of points to buy a decent skill. The grind would have to continue, but carefully, to avoid another death. Watching Kania prepare the carriage, Frey's dissatisfaction was hidden by a smirk. His time at the academy, he mused, was going to be fun. That evening, after Frey's speech at the opening ceremony, the nobles swarmed him, showering him with praise, all hoping to curry his favor. He played along, seeing them for what they were, vultures with painfully obvious motives. One of the students even informed him they wanted to propose a business deal for the imperial palace. And to sweeten the deal, they had brought several commoner women for his entertainment. Frey decided to lean into his role. He told them he would consider their request once he saw the depths of their sincerity. In reality, their behavior disgusted him to his very core. He wanted to deal with them as much as he wanted to crush the Demon King. But for now, he needed points, and acting despicably towards these nobles was the fastest way to earn them. Suddenly, he saw the young lords dragging the girls into the rooms, and realized with a jolt that they had captured Irina. Frey couldn't believe his eyes. Irina was a genius of elemental magic. With fire as her specialty, she should have been untouchable. He wondered, was she captured on purpose? Was this a trap to wipe out everyone in this room at once? Frey immediately opened the system shop, frantically scanning the skills he could afford. With the points he had, he chose the emergency defense skill. It could protect its target from a single fatal blow. Though it cost a steep 70 points, Frey didn't hesitate. He knew his life was on the line. After acquiring it, he sensed that Irina's mana was dangerously low. This seemed incredibly strange for a mage of her caliber. He concluded she must be storing her power for one massive, devastating explosion. As she struggled against the nobles, Frey ordered them to get lost. They just stared, stunned by his sudden change in attitude.
This time, he repeated it with a voice laced with fury, declaring that he wanted to have his fun with the ladies alone.
Terrified, the noble scrambled away, leaving the women at Frey's mercy. He then strode over to Irina, telling her they should have their fun somewhere a little more private.
She looked him dead in the eye and called him a disgusting monster.
She hissed that she wished she'd used her ultimate magic on him instead of the Demon King's army. He gave her a sadistic grin, telling her to shut up as he reached out a hand to intimidate her. This made Irina curse internally. She had been caught before midnight, ruining her plan. As she braced for the worst, she opened her eyes to see Frey collapsing unconscious on the floor. Her friend quickly broke free, urging Irina to escape with her while Frey was out cold. They fled immediately, her friend remarking how lucky they were to get away. If they hadn't, they would have faced a truly cruel fate, left all alone. Frey opened his eyes and sighed. He could only act so recklessly in front of Irina because he'd bought that emergency defense skill. And thanks to his little performance, he'd earned even more points. At the stroke of midnight, emergency defense activated. The system notified Frey that Irina's curse would have killed him by noon the next day. But that legendary skill could only be used once a year, meaning she was now in a state of mana exhaustion for an entire year. Still lying on the floor, Frey realized he'd been saved by a hair's breadth, just as Kania walked in. Seeing him drunk, she furiously hoisted him onto her back and began carrying him, just as he had demanded. As she carried him home, Frey cheerfully wished she would always be this disobedient. He felt his recent act was that of a clown. But he was using the situation to increase his life force. Kania then told him coldly that he was still nothing but scum, and if not for her sister, she would have killed him on the spot. Her icy words cut deep, making Frey remember how close they were as children in his past life, how she was always by his side. But now, she told him to just wait. Because the moment her sister's safety was guaranteed, she would personally make sure he stopped breathing. Later that night, Kania arrived at Frey's dorm and dropped him unceremoniously. As he tried to kick her out, she boldly announced that from now on, she would be living with him. Shocked, he demanded to know what she was talking about. She simply replied that she'd received special orders from the Duke himself. The Duke had commanded her never to let Frey out of her sight, or she would face expulsion. With that said, Kania began to make her bed, preparing to sleep. As she did, Frey checked the system, his blood running cold as he saw that several new rules had just been updated, rules that could lead to an instant game over. Looking them over, he realized he had no choice but to attend the academy, diligently and without fail. He also discovered the death of a single heroine would now be unforgivable, but the most fascinating rule, he was forbidden to die under any circumstances, except for the final battle. Frey then spent the rest of the night plotting around the new conditions the game had imposed. The next morning, as Kania tried to wake Frey for class, he screamed at her to leave him alone. To his surprise, she agreed and turned to leave, forcing him to call her back. In the middle of his tirade, he suddenly began coughing up blood. He knew instantly he'd given away too much of his life force the day before. Kania tried to ask what was wrong, but Frey immediately brushed it off. Instead, he cornered her, berating her for daring to leave the room without his direct command. He insulted her mercilessly, comparing her loyalty to a fountain pen that couldn't move on its own. He then threatened to make her sister his personal concubine if she ever showed such defiance again. At this, Kania finally broke down, crying and begging for her sister's sake. A true villain's smile spread across Frey's face as he walked out of the room. For his cruelty, the system rewarded him with 10 points, noting that his performance was almost too perfect. As he left, Kania noticed a small bloodstain on his bedsheets. A question formed in her mind. Did Frey have some kind of pre-existing illness? Later that day, while Professor Isares Anhembewar was introducing herself to the class, Frey and Kania burst into the lecture hall. Seeing their tardiness, Professor Isares immediately reprimanded them, deducting 10 points from each. As expected, Frey blamed Kania, calling her slow and useless. Suddenly, Irina, who was in the same class, recognized Frey, and her face filled with absolute terror. She had nearly unleashed her magic on him just the day before. After the first period, Ferlosh, another classmate, approached Frey. She asked if he wanted to follow her to a secluded area, so she could bless him. Luckily, the system flashed a warning of her murderous intent. He rejected her offer on the spot. She tried to persuade him, claiming her blessing was not the kind that could be bought with money. But Frey simply walked away. For their second class, Professor Isares announced they would be conducting combat training. She then ordered the students to come forward one by one, to duel her personally. Unsurprisingly, she demonstrated the overwhelming power of a professor, defeating every student without breaking a sweat. At last, it was Kanya's turn, and she stepped into the ring. When the match began, Kania proved to be on a different level from the others, holding her own against the professor. But something felt off. Kania was known for ending fights quickly to conserve her mana. This time, however, it seemed like she was deliberately dragging out the battle. And since there's a limit to the life force Frey can share from a distance, it wasn't long before the prolonged fight began to drain him. While Frey felt his own life force being siphoned away, Kania was calmly enjoying her duel with the professor. After sparring for a while, Professor Isares noted that Kania had far exceeded her expectations, and she was eager to see how long the girl could last. She lunged forward to continue, but Kania stopped her right then and there. She explained that she was born with unstable magic, and if the fight continued, she would lose control completely. Impressed, Professor Isares now understood why she had fought so cautiously from the start. She then remarked that Kania had the potential to become one of the most powerful mages in the land. Frey, on the other hand, was just relieved the fight was over. If Kania had dragged it on any longer, there was a high chance he wouldn't have survived.
Seeing his turn was next, Frey grew excited, equipping a pendant filled with demonic energy to amplify his power.
Next, Irina faced Professor Isarares, but was defeated instantly, still weakened from the spell sheet cast on Frey the previous day.
She was promptly sent to the infirmary. When it was Ferlocia's turn, she forfeited, claiming it was improper to use her power on a teacher.
Finally, it was Frey's turn. Our main character wore a wicked grin as he entered the arena, a cruel plan already forming to earn him more points.
Upon arriving, he tried to provoke Professor Isarares with crude and disrespectful language, but this only made her focus, challenging him to bring everything he had. With the help of the demonic energy, Frey unleashed a vicious assault on the professor, forcing her onto the defensive, much to the other students' shock. Isarares did her best to resist, but it was useless. Frey easily sent her weapon flying from her grasp. In that moment, Ferloche noticed something strange, drawing everyone's attention to the demonic aura pulsing from his pendant. Immediately, an investigation was launched, and her suspicions were confirmed to be true. Chaos erupts among the students, just as Frey had orchestrated, and for his masterful manipulation, the system rewards him with 2,000 villain points. However, Frey's cruel little scheme did not go unnoticed by Professor Isar. She summons him to her office immediately, demanding to know why he would bring a forbidden magic item onto Academy grounds. But Frey merely scoffs at her, claiming she's overreacting to a simple trinket. Isar's gaze softens, sensing a deeper issue. What truly happened to you, Frey? You were never this cold. For a fleeting moment, a flicker of regret crosses Frey's face. But he crushes it instantly, launching into a cynical tirade about adapting to a heartless society. He boldly declares that honesty is a luxury only fools can afford. Surprisingly, Isar decides to let it go, citing it as his first offense. In exchange, she demands he lead her to the shop where he bought the item. Her goal? To destroy it completely. Frey agrees coolly, mentioning he has some other business to attend to there anyway. As he leaves, Isar is left wondering what could have transformed him so drastically in such a short time. Later that night, Frey returns to his dorm. Kania greets him warmly, but he dismisses her with his usual contempt before turning in. His eyes briefly land on a black cat plushie, a gift from her sister, but he pays it no mind. Hours later, once Kania is sound asleep, Frey approaches her bed to replenish her vitality for the coming day. But he has no idea that Kania isn't truly asleep. She has transferred her consciousness into the plushie to watch his every move. Ever since she found blood on his sheets, she couldn't shake the feeling that Frey was hiding a dark secret. So she used her dark magic to create the perfect spy tool, allowing her to observe him without suspicion. Watching him approach her sleeping form, Kanya's suspicions flare. He's definitely up to something sinister. Then she watches in horror as he places a hand on her bare stomach. Rage boils within her, and she silently swears to kill him the moment she returns to her body. Yet, as she continues to watch, she notices he seems to be in agony as he performs the ritual. But she quickly dismisses the thought as irrelevant. A few moments later, Frey finishes and stands up, leaving Kanya bewildered. Suddenly, his eyes lock onto the plushie, and he walks towards it. Inside the toy, Kanya panics, believing her cover is finally blown. But to her absolute shock, Frey simply picks up the doll and hugs it tightly like a small child, revealing a side of him she never knew existed. The next morning, Frey awakens to Kanya groaning in pain, clutching her stomach. He immediately jumps to the wrong conclusion, calling her disgusting and yelling at her to use the bathroom. For this cruel misunderstanding, the system awards him 200 points. Thanks to his accumulated points, a system notification announces his promotion from the beginner stage to the intermediate stage. A new system shop has also been unlocked, granting him access to more powerful items. Wasting no time, he immediately begins browsing the new wares. Just then, another alert flashes. A new quest has been issued. He must stop an impending attack on the dormitories. The reward is the awakening of the hero's weapon, but the penalty for failure is severe, a drastic reduction in both his vitality and his lifespan. Realizing the stakes, Frey knows he needs to gear up and fast. A short while later, Professor Isar arrives at the dorm. Frey lazily orders Kanya to get the door, and Isar is shocked to find her there. As she questions the situation, Kanya reveals she has the Duke's permission to be there, leaving the professor speechless. Issa storms inside. She demands to know why Frey would agree to such a thing, but he seizes the opportunity to mercilessly taunt her about being an old maid. His cruel words strike a nerve, leaving the professor completely frozen. And just like that, the system chimes in with another reward. Kanya frantically tries to explain, but Frey simply escorts the stunned teacher out of the room. Later, the two head to the shop in disguise. Along the way, they witness a group of nobles cruelly tormenting commoners. The sight fills Professor Isar with a righteous fury. She vows that after she demolishes the shop, those corrupt nobles are next on her list. They finally arrive at a dilapidated building that Frey identifies as their destination. Without a moment's hesitation, Isar storms inside to begin her mission of destruction. As Frey waited outside, his eyes landed on a grim sight, a group of thugs attempting to trade away young girls. He knew he couldn't just stand by. He had to intervene. Frey overheard the traffickers muttering about how pleased their master would be. A dark premonition spurred him to follow them from the shadows. Their trail led him to a seedy brothel, where he saw the girls being dragged inside. But as he moved to enter, two hulking guards immediately blocked his path. They said a place like this was no home for a boy like him. Wasting no time, Frey tossed them some coin, and the shameless men groveled as they cleared a path for him.
Once inside, Frey was met by a young madam who presented a book filled with photos of different women, asking him to choose his preferred type. But Frey told her he wanted to see the real thing before making any decision. The madam replied that it was impossible, as that wasn't how they operated. But Frey came prepared. He presented her with a large sum of money that left the madam stunned. Seeing the gold, her eyes lit up instantly. She then began to lead him through an underground passage to show him the women. As the madam led the way, Frey glanced at her stats and was shocked to discover this woman was a subordinate of the Demon King, Kilbis, the Queen of Lust. Despite the revelation, he decided to play along to achieve his objective. They finally arrived at a wretched dungeon where countless beautiful women were being held hostage. Upon their arrival, the madam announced they had a guest and forced the women to smile. And just as expected, all the women put on fake smiles to welcome Frey, but it was clear they were all suffering immensely. The madam asked Frey if the sight was too bizarre for him, but he simply replied that it was fine. He then told her he didn't find any of the women attractive, as he was drawn to younger girls.
The madam hesitated for a moment.
But another bag of coins from Frey made the decision for her. Instantly, she led him to a corner of the room, where a secret passage in the wall was revealed. As she struggled to open it for him, Frey pushed her aside and stormed into the passage himself. The path led him to a dark chamber, where he found a group of children locked in cages next to a magic circle. It all became terrifyingly clear to Frey. The Lust Queen, Kilbis, was trying to use the children as sacrifices to summon the Demon King. The moment the children saw him, they began to cry out to Frey for help. Immediately after,
the Queen of Lust, now in her true form,
appeared with her shadow soldiers, ordering them to capture Frey, who was now a major obstacle to their grand plan.
Frey donned his mask, completely hiding his identity as he drew his weapon. Then, in the blink of an eye, he eliminated all the soldiers with light-speed attacks, leaving only the Lust Queen standing. As he slowly approached, she begged for her life.
After rescuing the children, Frey gave them some money for food and told them to go straight home without making a scene, and they departed. Afterward, he received a system notification detailing his reward for completing a sudden quest.
Looking through the notification, Frey wondered why the reward he received was so meager compared to what he expected.
Just then, he was interrupted by one of the children, who had returned to thank him. Looking at the child, Frey saw through her stats that she had immense potential to become a powerful mage. So he decided to gift his reward to her. Upon receiving it, the girl asked for his name, wanting to repay his kindness one day. But Frey told her not to worry about it, explaining that he was simply fulfilling his duty as a hero. As he left, he told the girl to be sure to study magic so she could become a top-tier mage, and the little girl promised she would. She then became determined that no matter what, she would find him and repay his kindness one day in the future. Frey had no idea that this brief intervention would eventually set in motion a much larger picture, one that would bring unimaginable changes to his story.
When Frey returned to the surface,
he found Isares had already wrecked the entire shop. Seeing him, she demanded to know where he'd been, but he calmly replied that he was just wandering around. He then told her about an upcoming auction being held at the Information Guild.
When Isares learned about the dark magic artifact up for sale, her eyes lit up, and she immediately began grilling him about the location.
Her hopes were then dashed when Frey told her about a barrier around the auction house, restricting entry to ticket holders only. Fortunately, since he had a ticket, he revealed that she could bypass the barrier, so long as she registered as his lover. A few hours later, the two arrived at the venue under the guise of a couple. As they settled in, all Frey could think about was obtaining that artifact. And since no one else knew about the stone's incredible features, he believed it wouldn't be too difficult to acquire. Suddenly, he sensed a familiar aura nearby. As if that wasn't enough, he also discovered that Fotosh would be participating in the auction as well. He realized that 3 of the main heroines had all gathered for the very same item he was after. Frey realized their shared objective, to use the artifact to bring him to his knees. A few minutes later, the artifact was unveiled, its undeniable power to suppress a target and control their mind announced to the crowd. With that, the bidding began at a single gold coin. Frey knew possessing that artifact was the only way he could complete his main quest. He decided to open with a bid of 15 gold. Kania immediately blocked him, countering with 20. Then, to their utter astonishment, Fotosh suddenly screamed a bid of 10,000 gold. It turned out she had gotten confused by the number of zeros. The auctioneer was about to seal the deal, but luckily for her, Frey raised the bid to 11,000 gold. A random wealthy man in the crowd then took a sudden interest in the artifact, surprising Frey with a bid of 12,000 gold. Unwilling to give up, Frey bid even higher, but the man relentlessly matched his every move. After a fierce back and forth, the artifact was finally sold to Frey for a staggering 55,000 gold. The moment the deal was finalized, Kania began weaving a powerful dark magic spell, intending to steal the artifact for herself. Thinking fast, Frey lunged forward to protect his new possession. But he was intercepted by a fiery kick from Kania that sent him flying across the room. Since Frey was in disguise, Kania didn't recognize him and demanded to know his identity. But instead of answering, Frey simply drew her attention to the fact that nearly half her dress had been burned away. Realizing this, a mortified Kania accused him of being a pervert. She was then joined by Fotosh. She condemned Frey as a servant of the Demon King, giving him no chance to defend himself before unleashing a devastating attack that should have annihilated him. But to her complete surprise, Frey emerged from the blast without a single scratch. The two girls then decided to team up against him. But before they could act, the wealthy man from the audience simply walked past them, and the pressure alone knocked them both unconscious.
He then dropped his disguise,
revealing his true form to Frey, the archdemon Carius. Frey demanded to know why an archdemon would show himself, and what he wanted. Carius revealed his fury that such a precious treasure had fallen into Frey's hands instead of his. He believed he was the artifact's rightful master, as it was the only tool that could amplify his power.
Frey suddenly realized that perhaps in his past life he was the one who had taken it. Just then, his attention was drawn to Aceres, who was fighting Kania with all her might. This was strange. Carius then revealed that he had cast a spell on Aceres when she tried to attack him. After a desperate struggle, Kania was finally overwhelmed by Aceres, who prepared to deliver the finishing blow. In that instant, Frey activated his divine mode, drew his sword, and beheaded Carius in a flash, much to the demon's surprise. Even though the caster had been defeated, the spell's effects remained, forcing Frey to intervene. Just as Aceres was about to strike Kania down, Frey threw himself between them, using his body as a living shield and taking a devastating wound for her. Kania demanded to know who he was and why he would help her, but Frey ignored her. With the injury he'd just received, he knew he couldn't fight Aceres. Instead, he unleashed a special attack that instantly shattered the spell's effect, causing Aceres to collapse. Frey then used the last of his strength to flee the building and race back to his dorm. A few moments later, Klana and Fodosh awoke, shocked to find a demon's corpse beside them. Regardless, they told Kania about the secret anti-Frey alliance they had formed, asking if she wanted to join. And as expected, she agreed. Klana then suddenly started scolding Fodosh for a mistake she made in a past life, one that had made it easy for Frey to defeat them. Meanwhile, Kania found a star-shaped brooch on the floor that looked suspiciously like the one Frey owned. That evening, when Frey arrived back at his dorm, he immediately bandaged his wound and carefully hid it under his clothes. As he did, he wondered why he had to face an archdemon and all three main heroines on the same night. Just then, Kania arrived. Frey tried to hurl his usual insults at her, but she ignored them and asked where he had been. Frey replied rudely that he had been shopping with the Ceres before going to bed. Kania then revealed that she had seen someone who not only looked exactly like him, but was also carrying his sword in a back alley. Frey was caught off guard, but he figured she had no concrete proof, so he decided to continue his denial. But Kania had an idea. She showed him the brooch she'd found, claiming he had forgotten it in the dorm before he left with the Ceres. As predicted, Frey fell for the trap and snatched the brooch from her hand. Kania then revealed she had found it at the auction house. Realizing his identity was exposed, Frey began to panic. In that moment, she checked his back and noticed the bandages. This confirmed her suspicions. Kania tried to find out why he had saved her, but before Frey could answer, he received a penalty from the system that drastically reduced his lifespan and vitality while causing him extreme pain. Seeing her master writhing in agony and coughing up blood, Kania began to panic. After Frey collapsed, Kania healed him, realizing her actions were a mistake, as she could have left him for dead. She was determined to know why he'd helped her, convinced she could simply kill him after getting an answer. And so she unleashed her dark magic upon him, delving into his subconscious to uncover the truth. This way, she would learn everything that went on inside Frey's mind. When she opened her eyes within his mindscape, she was shocked by how pure and peaceful it was, a total contrast to the person Frey pretended to be. As she looked around, Kania saw a small version of Frey, nervously welcoming her. Immediately, she activated her magic and shouted at the boy, demanding to know if he was the master of this subconscious. She then bound the child, believing him to be dangerous, and cast a truth spell, forcing him to swear an oath to answer honestly. The boy immediately swore the oath, and she released him. She then asked why the real Frey had helped her, and the boy replied it was because she was incredibly important to him. Kania couldn't understand. She demanded to know what he meant, recalling how cruelly Frey had treated her.
But the boy explained there was a devastating reason for Frey's harshness, and that he often sacrificed his own life force just to help her.
Stunned by this revelation, Kania froze. Seeing her reaction, the boy decided it was better to simply show her the real Frey. And so he revealed Frey's true motivation, to save not only her, but the entire world. To do so, he had no choice but to become a villain. That's when it all came crashing down. The reason Frey had collapsed was because she discovered him saving her. The truth shattered her, and she fell to her knees, weeping. The master of the subconscious tried to comfort her, telling her not to blame herself. After all, Frey could withstand being hated. Just like that, the mindscape shattered, and Kania returned to the real world. Hours later, Frey woke up to find Kania sobbing beside him, realizing she must have discovered his secret. Since there was no longer any point in lying, he confessed everything. He told her he was bound by a powerful vow. Although he wanted to save the world, he had to commit evil deeds to increase his power. But if he was ever caught doing something good, his own lifespan would be cut short as a penalty. Hearing the truth from his own lips, Kania finally understood why he had been so cruel to her. Still, Frey insisted he had used her for his own ends, and that she should never forgive him, saying his actions were inexcusable. But she disagreed, telling him she now knew the reason. After all, he had been transferring his life force to her every single night. He was shocked that she knew. So he asked what she would do now that he was exposed. Kania declared she would continue to serve him as she always had, unable to rest until she had repaid her debt. Frey had expected her to say something like that, so he allowed her to do as she wished. Later, at a cat cafe, the princess arranged a meeting with Fodosh and Kania, using the location as a cover to plot Frey's downfall. Since they couldn't obtain the domination stone, their new plan was to find Frey's weakness and use it to restrain him.
As the two girls spoke of their desires, Kania secretly planned to act as a spy for Frey to help him. But then she realized how powerless she was against the threads of fate, so she decided to start with something small. And the first thing that came to mind was giving him a proper meal, wanting to see Frey smile, even if just for a fleeting moment. Kania prepared breakfast for Frey, and he not only told her how delicious it was, but admitted he'd been dreaming of this for a very long time. Soon after, Frey said he would transfer his life force to her, but she was now deeply worried for him. He reassured her that it was fine, and that he wouldn't let her die. There was no other choice. She agreed, but begged him not to overdo it. She then sat and watched him struggle as he performed the life force transfer. Noticing the toll the penalty was taking on his body, Kania suddenly felt a sharp pain in her stomach. Frey realized his pure mana and her dark magic were mixing violently. Without a second thought, he absorbed the corrupted magic himself, ignoring her desperate warnings. A moment later, her pain subsided. That's when she saw that his left arm had become corrupted, but he told her not to worry. Since it wasn't his dominant hand, it wouldn't be a major problem. Even so, Kania worried that it would be incredibly difficult for his arm to recover. But Frey told her not to mind it, as it would return to normal as soon as everything was over. She looked heartbroken at the thought, and the two prepared to leave for the academy. Frey noted his condition was terrible, but he had accumulated a massive amount of points at the academy. With them, he'd acquired all the skill items possible, and could now focus on the main quest. Upon accepting the main quest, he was tasked with fighting and defeating Irina during the midterm exam. If he won, he would receive a life force replenishing item. However, the mission was optional, so he could skip it without affecting the main story. He analyzed the quest and realized that the nobles who lost to Irina would later attack the commoners' dormitory. But he could change his own role in that future, based on whether he won, lost, or fled from Irina. He could choose to avoid the fight entirely and frame someone else as the villain. With that, he could become the mastermind, or he could fight her. If he won, he'd get the reward, but if he lost... Looking at his options, Frey chose the path of the villain, deciding to follow the prophecy to the letter. Iseret ended the class, instructing the students to prepare thoroughly so they wouldn't fail, and to pair up before the next session. As the class was dismissed, Frey was lost in thought, wondering what to do. The truth was, Irina stood no chance of defeating him. He stepped outside, only to find a few troublesome nobles cornering Irina and her friend, harassing them for running away when they were meant to be Frey's sacrifices. When Frey saw them, he didn't scold the nobles. Instead, he praised them for taking action without his command. The noblewoman happily clung to him as he told them he was just thinking about Irina. He then strode over to her and asked why she ran. But Irina's friend shot back that she wasn't foolish enough to just stay there. Frey brushed the friend aside and demanded Irina accept his deal. The winner of their test would be able to command the loser to do anything they wished. Her friend immediately protested, declaring she didn't trust him for a second. But Frey reminded her he was speaking to Irina, unless she wanted to face him in the test instead. Realizing his threat, she fell silent, and Irina agreed to the duel. He then promised to give her 1,000 gold if she won, but if she lost,
she would become his slave. With that, he produced a cursed skull pendant for them to make a life and death vow, bluntly stating that commoners can't be trusted to keep their word.
This stunned the nobles and enraged Irina so much that she ignored her friend's warnings and accepted the pact. And so she took out her own pendant. Once the skulls merged, chains of magic shot out from them, piercing straight into their hearts. Frey then spoke arrogant words before her, as the nobles watched in awe of his sheer audacity. He then turned to them and ordered them not to lay a hand on these two commoners again. They should all follow his example. The example of one who refuses to take advantage of others. With that, it was settled. The nobles wouldn't bother Irina anymore now that he had partnered with her. The problem now was losing to her while she was suffering from mana exhaustion, and he knew that throwing a fight convincingly would be no easy task. As he walked away, the system awarded him 500 points for the contract, unlocking a new skill shop with additional options. Looking at a new skill, he saw one that would allow him to transfer mana. Frey realized he could give Irina his mana to counteract her exhaustion. After purchasing the magic transfer skill, he noted it would cover the main quest with Irina. Frey saw he still had some points left, so he wondered if he should buy another skill. He checked the catalog and found a skill that could make others slightly more convinced by his lies, so he bought it instantly. He believed it would come in handy for the mountain of lies he'd have to tell in the future. He then brazenly declared himself a woman to test it out, but unbeknownst to him, Photosh had overheard and was completely shocked, dashing away with a massive misunderstanding. Frey initially thought about chasing her to correct it, but then decided to just let her be. He figured it wouldn't cause any real harm. At the Academy's training grounds 3 days later, Frey watched Irina from the bushes and saw her training with all her might. Despite her low mana, her friend tried to warn her not to overdo it. But Irina was determined, forcing out a magic attack she believed could finally grant her victory against Frey. But little did she know, he was moved to tears watching her incredible dedication. After a few attempts, she successfully created fireballs. Frey was impressed with her skill, creating flames with so little mana, and he silently promised to give her some of his magic. Unfortunately, the effort completely drained Irina. Her friend cared for her and offered to help indirectly, believing Frey must have some trick up his sleeve. Hearing this, an idea sparked in Frey's mind. He was delighted that he could execute his plan through Irina's friend. But then Irina refused her friend, saying she wanted to win with her own strength. If they teamed up, she'd be no different from Frey. Frustrated by Irina's pride, the friend walked her back to the dorm, wishing she had just accepted the offer. Frey wished for the same thing, since it would have made his plan so much easier to pull off. Suddenly, a pigeon arrived carrying a piece of paper. When Frey read it, he realized it was a letter from Fotosh, who claimed to know his secret. In the letter, she ordered him to meet her at the church. He just called her a nuisance. That afternoon, Frey arrived and struggled with the heavy doors. Inside, he found Fotosh praying, with a box nearby. When she saw him, she reached into the box and demanded to know why he had dared to deceive her all this time. Confused, he wondered why he wasn't collapsing or coughing up blood, as she declared she had discovered his true identity. But to his utter surprise, she pulled out a maid's dress, telling him the rumor that he was a woman would shake the very foundations of the world. Stunned by her declaration, he could only wonder why on earth she was holding a maid outfit. But then she made him an offer. If he became her personal maid, she would keep his secret. That's when Frey pieced it all together. Realizing she was caught in a massive misunderstanding, he calmed down and tried to leave, telling her to do as she pleased. Unfortunately for him, this foolish girl wouldn't let him go. She began inspecting him closely, commenting that his body was far too flat for his initial claim. Insulted, he shot back that he was a man, but Fotosh refused to believe it. Instead, she demanded he check her for proof, but he just screamed in her face, calling it a crime. It took her a few seconds to process what he'd said. When she finally realized Frey was truly a man, she was mortified. As he walked away, Fotosh pointed out that things could have been simple. She could have saved him from being killed, if only he were a woman. In a flash, she grabbed him by the throat and slammed him to the floor. Through tears, she screamed that Kania had found his weakness and was planning his execution, while all she wanted to do was save him. If he had just followed her quietly, everything would have been fine. But now, Fotosh had no other choice but to end his life. As Frey was being choked, he could see that Fotosh was just venting her frustrations on him. So he pretended to be dead, and she fell for it, believing she'd killed him. Calling herself a criminal, she promised to join him in the afterlife, and raised a magic-infused hand to end her own life. Suddenly, a system alert warned Frey to protect her from one fatal blow per day. He instantly screamed for her to stop, leaving her stunned that he was still alive. Thinking fast, she powered up her magic, ready to strike him down again. But he simply pressed a button on his shirt, replaying her confession about Grana's plan to kill him. He furiously declared he wasn't stupid enough to come empty-handed. Then he stalked towards her, stating that he had proof of the murder conspiracy between her and the princess. This meant that if the public ever found out, she would be in a world of trouble. And so, he blackmailed her. He forced her into the maid outfit she'd bought and made her clean his room. Even though she'd already cleaned the place 5 times, Frey insisted she'd do it again. Frustrated, she yelled at him. But he simply played the recording again. She started sweeping until she collapsed from exhaustion, declaring she couldn't take it anymore. Frey then threatened her with a different job, night service, but she told him she would rather let the rumors spread than do something like that. He immediately slapped her, earning 500 points for being a terrible master. He then reminded her that she was the one who begged him not to spread the rumors, the one who promised she would do anything for him. Returning to his seat, he glared at her, warning her to obey if she didn't want to experience hell. Shocked and disgusted by his actions, Foz screamed at him, demanding to know what happened to the kind person he used to be. But he dismissed her, thinking she was just trying to act pathetic. Foz then told him about a time he gave her a potion when she was injured. But Frey had no idea what she was talking about. Suddenly, a memory flashed in his mind of the old Frey holding a potion, and he wondered where it came from. Foz's mood shifted, accepting that this new Frey was complete garbage. She picked up the broom to continue her work, and Frey realized that any lingering affection she had for him was now completely gone. In its place, there was only pure negativity. Frey wasn't bothered by her attitude, since in a few months, anyone who showed him kindness would face punishment anyway. That evening, Frey returned to the dorm. Kania noticed he'd been drinking and asked him why, especially with the nightmares he'd been having lately. Frey just reassured her, saying he'd endured the same in his past life. He told her to lie down so he could transfer some life force to her. Kania quietly obeyed and unbuttoned her shirt, which made him blush instantly. He quickly explained that he didn't actually need to touch her stomach to transfer magic, but Kania saw no reason to change her position. However, when Frey mentioned that it was awkward for him to have to look away, she finally realized that he was a boy too. Stammering, she agreed and lay on his bed. Soon, he began transferring his magic into her. And in that moment, he learned that she had entered his subconscious when he was passed out the other day. Frey was happy to learn the truth, but he warned her not to push herself too hard. After all, he had done unforgivable things in his past life. However, Kanya's resolve didn't waver. She knew that in both timelines, Frey had risked his own life to save hers. Later that night, while Frey was sleeping, Kania saw he was trapped in a nightmare and vowed to help him. It was the least she could do, since she couldn't save him directly. She picked up her cat, realizing it was the perfect camouflage to help Frey, since it wasn't human. With that, she began the ritual and entered his subconscious mind. There, Frey was wandering through a desolate void, trying to understand where he was, but just then, he spotted a black cat that looked incredibly familiar. So he picked it up and told it to come along with him. Suddenly, a thick fog swirled around him. As he peered through it, he saw his younger self talking to a small Fotish. Frey wondered if this was a dream, but he continued to watch them. On the other side, Fosha didn't recognize the boy and demanded to know why he was giving her a potion, but he simply introduced himself, saying it was only natural to help those in need. Fotosh refused to believe him, calling young Frey a liar. This puzzled the older Frey watching from the sidelines. He didn't remember their first meeting being outside the slums. It was supposed to have been at the church. Young Frey decided her suspicion was understandable. He told her he'd leave the potions and she was free to do with them as she pleased. Curious, she asked where he was going. He just pointed toward the church, saying he was heading there. As he departed, he added that while he may not be a good person, the people in the church were trustworthy. Fodish called for him to wait, but young Frey kept walking, leaving her alone once more. She realized he didn't seem like a bad person, but she couldn't fathom what he was thinking. As the fog around her dissipated, she turned to stone. And Frey knew this was no mere dream. He remembered petrifying her before, realizing that while Fodish could be a fool, she was incapable of telling a lie. What he'd just seen perfectly matched her explanation. It was far too real to be just a dream. This was likely a real memory. A chill went down his spine as he wondered if someone had manipulated his mind. The thought sent a jolt through him. Suddenly, a black fog gathered around him, and he felt a deeply sinister presence. The next thing he saw was a horribly injured Fee Roach, bound in chains and bleeding, not just from her wounds, but from her eyes and mouth. Adrift in a dark abyss, Frey realized he was in a terrible situation and began searching for a way out. Just then, a voice echoed, asking how long he planned to sleep and urging him to wake up. When he looked up, he was stunned to see Foch's bloody corpse smiling at him, chained to a cross with weapons piercing her body. She called him the criminal who had caused her so much pain. Frey trembled in fear, but the madness only intensified as the mangled corpse of Kania appeared behind him, asking if he enjoyed killing people. He noticed his hands were stained crimson and wondered where the blood came from. But then he saw them, horrifying, blood-soaked, undead versions of Kania and Serena right in front of him. As he cried out for help, the undead Kania asked if he was happy now that she had died for him, just as he wished. This plunged him deeper into despair, begging for anyone to save him. However, the undead girls surrounded him, dragging him into a dark portal. In the real world, Kania bit him in her cat form, desperately trying to wake him up. But he wouldn't awaken, and she realized his subconscious was spiraling out of control. As she fought to pull him from that dark gate, she feared the young master would be twisted into an undead creature, just like the girls in his dream. She was determined to save him, and knew she couldn't do it properly in a cat's body. As Frey fell into the abyss, a brilliant light suddenly shone down from above. And when he opened his eyes, he found himself in another dimension, a paradise compared to the previous one. As he was trying to figure out where he was, a voice said they had arrived just in time, making him wonder who was speaking. Suddenly, a woman appeared before him, shining like a goddess as she expressed her happiness that the power she had placed in his subconscious long ago had activated. Frey realized it was his mother. She gently pulled him into an embrace, telling him her final gift would ensure he wouldn't be tormented by nightmares for a while. As tears streamed down Frey's face, she told him the path he had chosen was one filled with thorns, and warned him that things would not always go his way. However, she said that when things become dire, he must remember what is truly important to him and what he truly wants to protect. In the real world, Kania woke from her sleep, immediately worried about the young master. When she shot up to check on him, she found him perfectly fine, reading a book as if nothing had happened. She asked if he was all right in his dream. Her question made him realize she was the cat from his dream. He thanked her for the moment of relief, but she apologized for not being able to help more. He then revealed that he had met his mother, the late Duchess, in the dream world. She had told him to remember what he wants to protect when he feels lost. However, Frey was terrified. His memories had been manipulated, and he no longer knew who to trust. Even the prophecy book he relied on could be a complete lie. Just then Kania hugged him from behind and told him to trust her. As he took her hand, she confessed that he had worked harder than anyone else for others' sake, and assured him that even if his memories were manipulated and all his efforts were in vain, she would never forget his admirable way of life. In that moment, Frey remembered why he chose this path. He knew it would be difficult, but he was determined to protect those he cared for. As tears streamed down his face, he knew this was no time for despair. Even in failure, his efforts would never be in vain. A few days later, back at the academy, Icelet announced the start of the midterm exams, calling the students forward one by one. As they stepped up, Frey felt a wave of gratitude. Nothing had happened since the last clash, and he was finally ready to face Irina. The system warned him, overusing mana infusion through physical contact could drain his reserves, even causing him to lose consciousness. But he was confident. He had maxed out his infusion skill and trained relentlessly with Kania. As Fodish and Kania prepared for their duel, Icelet informed them that this time, forfeiting was not an option. But Fodos just smirked, saying she had no intention of quitting. She gathered mana around her body, while Kania focused her own power into her fingertip. Seeing this, Frey knew the two ladies were plotting something, but he reassured himself, convinced they couldn't possibly attack him from that distance. As Kania's mana intensified, Fotosh prepared to unleash a devastating punch. Kania fired her attack, and Fodos punched it directly toward Frey. As the blast hurtled closer, he finally realized they had planned to kill him from the very beginning. But in a flash, Icelet intercepted the attack with her blade. She then warned them both. If their attack on Frey was deliberate, they would be disqualified. The girls had no choice but to settle things between themselves. When Fotosh lunged with a punch, Kania dodged, unleashing a flurry of lightning-fast strikes that sent Fotosh crashing to the ground. Seeing this, Icelet declared Kania the winner and called for the next match, Frey and Irina. As Frey stepped forward, Kania warned him not to overdo it, but he simply smiled, saying they had already practiced how to lose gracefully. When Frey and Irina reached the arena, she immediately began to provoke him. But he shot back with his own taunts, ready to put on a show. As they faced off, Frey gathered his mana, while Irina prepared to incinerate him with a fire attack. The moment Isolate announced the start of the match, Frey charged at Irina, but she summoned 7 fireballs to block his path, a feat he thought was impossible. However, the fireballs fizzled out as she began to cough. He explained that this was the price she paid for overusing her power. He decided to stick to his original plan, using his mana-infused hand to slam her head into the ground. Looking down at her, he called her a pathetic insect and decided to share a gift of his own mana. While he was torturing her with the infusion, she summoned a fireball behind him, landing a direct hit on his back. As he writhed in pain, she scolded him for hurting a woman, summoning a massive fireball to finish him off. However, Frey was confident in a single hidden strike he'd landed earlier. Suddenly, Irina's brain began to overheat. In an instant, her fireball vanished, and she collapsed. Isolate reminded her that Frey would win if she couldn't get up in 10 seconds. As the countdown began, Frey grew worried. He felt he'd gone too far, using his full power infusion when only a fraction would have been enough. Irina knew she was in trouble. Her mana was recovering, but her body refused to stand. Suddenly, a glowing magic circle appeared around them. Frey panicked, recognizing it as a teleportation spell. Before he could figure out what was happening, he and Irina were whisked away to another location. Seeing this, Isolate ordered the other students to stay put. She hadn't detected the spell before it activated, meaning other traps could be hidden in the area. A student from the back read from a piece of paper she'd found, realizing it was a recovery scroll. Meanwhile, Frey and Irina appeared in a strange forest. The hero worried, his plans completely ruined by one disaster after another. Checking on Irina, he was relieved to find she was only unconscious, not dead. As he sat on the ground, he recognized his surroundings. They were in the Grey Forest, the most monster-infested place on the entire continent. He wondered how an injured hero and a mage with no mana could possibly survive a place like this. But then he realized the source of their teleportation, the girl with the scroll, whose name was Arian. The chances she was trying to help were slim to none. He assumed it was all a mistake and decided to ask her about it later. As he looked down at Irina's unconscious form, he began thinking of a way out. The system inventory proposed an item, the Mask of Deception, capable of hiding his identity and even his voice from those nearby. He equipped the mask, grateful for the system's adjustment. It would keep him from being recognized, even at close range. After waking Irina, he told her they needed to escape this dangerous place immediately. When she asked what happened, he lied, saying Frey had used a teleportation scroll to bring her here. He assured her that she was safe now, urging her to hurry. Still, confusion clouded her mind over the unbelievable situation she was in. When she demanded to know his identity, he spun a lie, claiming to be an intelligence agent for the Starlight family. He said he was abandoned in the woods after contracting a fatal illness. To make his story more convincing, he claimed Frey brought him here to be silenced after he tried to resign, knowing death was the only way out. Hearing this, Irina reached a terrifying conclusion. Frey must have brought her here to die as well. Frey, who despised lying, then claimed the sword he carried was dropped by adventurers who mistook him for a ghost. He urged her to follow him to a safe place nearby, warning that Frey would soon return with reinforcements. But she hesitated, feeling that something about him was off. His story was plausible, of course, since a true ally of Frey would never offer her help. She thanked him but insisted on going alone, pointing out she was more than capable of protecting herself. Frey warned her that she was being reckless. But she declared that even with only 10% of her mana left, she could defend herself, so long as no high-level monsters appeared. As if on cue, a giant bear materialized before her. She froze, paralyzed with shock, wondering why a high-level beast was so far from its usual territory. As Irina trembled in terror, the great beast roared, swiping its massive claws at her. But in a flash, Frey leaped from behind, unleashing a single devastating slash that cleaved the monster in two. Irina stood stunned by what she had just witnessed. He explained this was precisely why he didn't want her going alone. He knew dangerous high-level beasts were lurking nearby. In that moment, she shouted a warning. Danger is coming from behind. He spun around to find a horde of goblins charging toward them, weapons raised. This was getting vexing. He grabbed her hand and pulled her into a desperate escape. The goblins gave chase relentlessly as they dashed through the woods, but at last they reached a safe haven. There, Irina asked why such powerful monsters were in this area. He simply told her the forest was home to all kinds of deadly creatures. Then her gaze fell upon the blood staining his mask. He explained that his chronic illness was flaring up again, as he had overexerted himself in the fight against the bear. Seeing his mask bloodied and his breathing labored, she offered to remove it and reached out to do it herself. However, he smacked her hand away just before she could touch him. He apologized, claiming he couldn't let anyone see his disfigured face. She chose to believe him and told him to wait there while she found some fruit, assuring him she was quite knowledgeable about such things. He warned her not to wander too far for her own safety. She then introduced herself, prompting him to give his fake name, Rihanna. She thanked him for saving her twice, but he brushed it off, saying he couldn't abandon someone who shared his cruel fate. As she ventured into the trees, she promised a swift return. The moment she was gone, he removed the mask, revealing his wounded face. Frey was actually grateful for the monster's appearance, as he wasn't entirely confident his fabricated story was enough to deceive her. But thanks to his heroic display, all her suspicions about him had vanished completely. Remembering his mission to defeat Irina in a duel, he summoned the system to get some answers. It informed him that his victory status was still pending, and no penalty would be issued, since ignoring the mission didn't affect the story's progression. He suspected the Academy had suspended the judgment due to the fact that students were now randomly disappearing, with no penalty hanging over his head. He decided to focus all his energy on escaping the forest. It was teeming with deadly beasts, and a single misstep could cost him his life. After 3 days of trekking together, Irina gathered some edible plants, reflecting on how she had no choice but to rely on Rihanna while her magic was sealed. They foraged for food, avoided monsters and other dangers until they finally neared the edge of the woods. As Irina prepared their meal by the campfire, she thought of how worried Ariane must be and resolved to apologize the moment she returned to the academy. Just then, Frey returned, dragging a wild boar he had hunted. This surprised her, knowing he was unwell, but he told her not to worry, as the monsters were thinning out here. While he dressed the boar for their meal, she asked him, "Are you really planning to stay here?" She argued that he couldn't just live in this forest forever. But his answer remained unchanged. He lied, saying that in his condition, he would never be able to escape Frey's grasp if he left. She promised she would find a way to help him, but he refused to be a burden, adding that she couldn't protect him when Frey inevitably came hunting. Seeing her frown, he told her that living in the forest wasn't so bad once he got used to it. He had been persistent about this for 3 days. Finally, she conceded defeat, agreeing to leave him behind in the woods. She then handed him some fruit to eat while their meal cooked, and though it pained her to abandon her savior, she understood he must have his reasons. Holding a strangely shaped fruit. He asked if it was an ice dragon fruit, but she had no idea what it was. He revealed it was something he loved to eat as a child. This fruit even had a special name he'd given it, known only to him and a few others. Suddenly, the entire forest began to tremble. Irina thought it was an earthquake, but he warned her it was something far, far worse. A horde of mutated monsters, failed chimera experiments, and many other abominations were approaching. He reassured her, claiming he could handle them all, except for the Dark Golem, a beast that even other monsters couldn't defeat. As the Dark Golem loomed closer, Frey drew his sword, telling Irina he couldn't fight while protecting someone else. As his aura flared to life, he pointed his blade at the beast, telling her to run while he bought her some time. Watching her go, Frey wondered if he could truly handle this as well as he promised. Just then, the system activated, informing him the Dark Golem had a 21% unawakened energy absorption rate. He realized this was the final boss of the current scenario's second half. It absorbs the power of its defeated enemies before being collected by the Demon King's army. Seeing the monster hadn't absorbed much power yet, he figured its current combat ability was equivalent to an entire army. And he knew he couldn't use his stellar magic, as it would instantly expose his true identity. At that moment, the Dark Golem's eyes glowed, locking onto him as a target. It scanned them, plotting their annihilation. It initiated its attack, firing a powerful energy beam directly at them. But Frey managed to protect himself and Irina just in time. He urged her to flee, but she refused, shouting that she couldn't leave him behind. Seeing its attack fail, the golem decided to bury them alive instead. As the golem gave chase, the masked hero told Irina that he was running out of time, but would use his last bit of energy to help her, because she was the only one who could avenge him. In that instant, she had a flashback of Frey saving her in the exact same way, a brilliant smile on his face. She thanked him, promising to never forget this debt. As she ran, she vowed to kill that cruel bastard, and Frey silently thanked the heavens that his acting skills had gotten so much better. As the Dark Golem closed in, a terrifying aura radiating from its body. Frey felt a wave of relief that Irina had escaped. He charged his own blade with a brilliant, cold aura and decided to finally go all out. Suddenly, alarm bells rang in the monster's head as its internal system warned of an emergency regarding target number 8. With Irina safely away, Frey charged head-on at the beast. He told it that he was its opponent now, and with a single slash, severed its leg, sending it crashing to the ground. Lying on the ground, the golem's system announced a balance system error and began searching for a countermeasure. The monster's movements were sealed. Frey knew he needed to destroy its core to finish it for good. But suddenly, the Dark Golem activated a missile launcher as its countermeasure. As a barrage of missiles flew toward Frey, he realized that demons truly know no mercy. And after reinforcing his sword with his aura, he unleashed a storm of lightning-fast, powerful slashes, destroying every single missile. As the golem continued its barrage, Frey paused for breath, realizing he had to destroy the core soon. If this battle dragged on, it would be fatal for him. Meanwhile, the Dark Golem updated his target data, classifying him as a Tier 1 high-risk target and executing a self-destruct code. As the Dark Golem began gathering dark energy, Frey knew that both he and Irina would be in grave danger if it blew itself up. So he charged forward, determined to stop it. He then leaped into the air and plunged his fully charged sword into the monster, causing a massive explosion to rock the area. The golem now lay helpless on the ground. Frey stood with his sword embedded in its chest, his mask cracking, before he finally collapsed from exhaustion. As blood trickled from his mouth, he wondered if the golem was truly defeated. But then he spotted a scout crow, realizing villagers might come to investigate the noise from their battle. He knew Irina would discover his identity if the villagers found him there, so he desperately tried to escape. But his body wouldn't move an inch. As he fell to the ground, he saw an imposing mage standing over him, surrounded by dark magic.
Looking closer, he saw the mysterious mage was Kania. She told him to leave everything to her.
While helping him up, she informed him that a carriage was waiting nearby and promised to get him to the dorms unnoticed.
With that, he comfortably passed out in her arms. Back at the dorm, a desperate Kania checked on him as he slept.
When he finally awoke, she informed him that he'd been unconscious for 2 whole days. He told her he was fine, just exhausted, and asked for an update on the current situation.
She then revealed the Bureau of Investigation was looking into his sudden disappearance in the forest.
It turned out Ariane had used a teleportation scroll to rescue Irina.
Frey was surprised by this, but Kania noted how strange it was, since it should have been a recovery scroll.
When he asked if it was an accident, she explained the investigators believe it's highly likely, but it will only be ruled an accident if they can confirm Ariane's testimony. Hearing this, Frey wondered how such a coincidence was possible, realizing the shop might have sold her a counterfeit scroll. He ordered Kania to investigate its origin, but she informed him someone else was already handling the case.
When he asked about Irina's whereabouts, she revealed Irina had just returned to the academy after being found in a nearby village.
A wave of relief washed over him. His entire goal was to ensure her safe escape.
And as for their duel, Kania revealed he had been declared the winner the day before. He felt a pang of dissatisfaction, knowing a loss would have made things easier, but was ultimately glad to avoid the system's penalty.
However, the quest to fight and defeat Irina remained on the system window. He decided he would find a way to clear it after he recovered.
He began to thank Kania for the information, but she cut him off, revealing it was the Duke who made finding his location so easy.
The news stunned him, since he knew his father was traveling with Arya.
She explained that his father rushed to the magic tower the moment he heard about the incident, demanding to know the scroll's destination.
He got his answer, but on the way back he collapsed from the strain and still hasn't woken up.
The words struck Frey like a physical blow. He asked Kania if he could lean on her for just a moment. She agreed, holding him tightly as he finally broke down in her arms.
A few days later, on the weekend, Kania suggested Frey get some rest before heading home.
But Frey refused, saying he couldn't just lie there while his father was bedridden.
After putting on his coat, he told her he wouldn't stay long, and that he also needed to prepare for his main quest. Just then, she informed him that Irina was waiting outside his room. He told Kania to let her in. As Irina entered, he slipped on his mask of a cruel tyrant, asking if she was truly saved by that commoner.
Though disgusted by his attitude, she fell to her knees, begging him to release Ariane and promising her complete obedience.
Frey remained outwardly calm, though he was surprised she came to negotiate directly instead of seeking revenge for what happened in the forest. After ordering Kania to prepare the carriage, he sneered that he had no obligation to listen to her, his slave.
Desperate, she swore she would do anything he commanded, so he tasked her with finishing what he couldn't in the forest. Despite the humiliation burning on her face, she accepted his demand.
But he simply scoffed, claiming he had no interest in someone so obedient, and walked away, earning 300 points for his vile act.
He then ordered her to go wash up, declaring he'd only help her if she did a good job, and she agreed.
Outside, Kania asked what his demand was, but he told her to forget it, promising to tell her everything on the way. As their carriage moved forward,
Frey told Kania that Irina had begged for Ariane's release. He decided he would free her upon his return, since she hadn't tried to bribe or manipulate him.
He then brought up Kania's use of dark magic in the forest, asking how she was feeling. She assured him she was fine. The spell she used didn't require draining her life force. He told her she was his only pillar of support, the only reason he could still smile in this twisted world.
But this incident made him realize he couldn't keep going on like this.
So from that moment on, he decided he would rely on her strength in earnest. She agreed to support him completely, for her life was his to command. He told her to take care of herself so she could act if something happened again, like him losing consciousness or being teleported.
He then took out a special artifact from his system inventory, telling her this item, along with her sister, would undoubtedly be a great help.
At the Starlight family manor, Frey's father, Abraham, lay unconscious as Frey arrived, taking his hand and promising to return once everything was over. As he sat silently by his father's side, he heard a knock on the door. Kania entered, asking if he was certain about his decision. Frey explained there was no point in staying. He was just the useless son who brought shame to his parents. His presence would only cause misunderstandings. He mentioned the doctors confirmed his father's life wasn't in danger, and that things should return to normal if they handle everything correctly. When he suggested visiting his sister's room, Kania agreed. When he asked about the little girl, Kania reported that she'd used magic to help her sleep. She then warned him that his sister might be heartbroken to see him like this.
But Frey dismissed her worries, telling her to wait in his room. He promised his talk with his sister wouldn't take long. Entering the room, he saw Kanya's sister sleeping peacefully. His first thought was how much she resembled Kania.
And yet, her innate abilities were the complete opposite. As he held the special artifact,
the system notified him it was a potential elixir, an item that could unleash the drinker's latent powers.
Unlike Kania, who sacrificed her own life force when wielding dark magic,
her sister Kania specialized in controlling and suppressing it. Realizing she could even control others' dark magic, Frey knew the elixir was perfect for her.
As he administered the potion to the sleeping Virl,
he mused that only a fraction of her power had awakened, due to her age. This elixir would unlock her true, full potential. After she drank it, he smiled. The elixir's effects would manifest within half a day.
Just then, his sister Arya blasted him with a surge of magic, demanding to know what he'd done to Katya, but he just smiled, effortlessly dodging her furious attacks.
As he sat back in a corner, she rushed to check on Katya, accusing him of She then laid bare the downfall he had brought upon their house, and it cut him deep, because she was confronting him, not welcoming him with open arms. Experience AI voice technology at vb.vn. He then asked what was so wrong with using things that already belonged to him.
Furious, she shot back that she was not just some thing to be used.
However, he sank even lower, reminding her that with their father in a coma, he was now the head of the family. He could do whatever he pleased, because everything in this mansion was his.
He then ordered her to leave so he could continue his amusement.
But with tears brimming in her eyes, she began to beg him to stop. Lightly tapping his chest, she pleaded for the kind older brother she once knew to come back.
But he shoved her away, complaining that she was ruining the mood. He then told her he'd stop for today, only because her crying annoyed him, and warned her to stay out of his sight.
As he left the room, gaining 300 villain points, Arya collapsed in tears, wondering what had happened to her brother, the kindest person she had ever known.
Meanwhile, he sat just outside the door, consumed by regret, wondering how they had ever reached this breaking point.
Lying in his bed, he realized that confronting his own family was taking a massive emotional toll.
Though he'd been playing this villainous role for a while, he resolved not to get sentimental. Anyone who cared for him would be punished in the coming events. Just then, she arrived, informing him that the procedure they performed had a tremendous effect.
After summoning a sphere of dark magic into her hand, she explained that after the treatment, she could now control dark magic and execute large-scale tasks, like creating clones. She proved this by creating a perfect duplicate of Frey, which delighted him. He could use this to easily conceal his identity. He instructed her to infiltrate the subconscious of the dormitory residents and send a few clones to keep watch. After she departed on her mission, Frey felt a wave of relief. Now he could focus on his main quest without worrying. And since he had an advantage over Irina and the other two girls who despised him, he felt the quest would proceed smoothly, barring any major incidents. Then he remembered something odd. Serena still hadn't returned from her trip. Meanwhile, somewhere on the western continent, Serena was exploring a forest with her companion, who noted that the paper in Serena's hand looked like scribbles she'd seen in some ruins. When the girl asked why Serena suddenly decided to visit the heroes' ruins from 1,000 years ago, Serena replied that she had to take a shortcut because time was running out. Within the pages, the writer lamented that being chosen as a hero was enough, but imagined their descendants facing an even crueler fate. They then surmised Frey was now undertaking his first main quest, and Serena found this very interesting. As she read the page, she wondered what expression Frey would make when he discovered everything and returned home. Outside the mansion, Frey stepped into a waiting carriage. From inside, Arya watched him through the window, her face a mask of sorrow. A moment later, she grimly drew the curtains closed. As the carriage began to move, Kania asked Frey if it was all right to leave without seeing Arya, but he calmly replied that meeting her would only bring more pain. Kania fell silent, watching him with a worried gaze as their journey began. Before long, Kania asked for the details of the first main quest so she could properly assist him. Frey immediately saw the benefit of sharing information, just in case something went wrong. He then revealed that the first main quest was to capture the culprit behind the attack on the commoners' dormitory. Frey noted that he would have become the culprit if he had lost the battle with Irina, while glancing at the system window detailing the quest. However, the system revealed a crucial detail. Skipping the quest would not affect the scenario's progress, nor would it incur any penalty. Frey recalled his past life, remembering how easily he'd cleared this mission by staging the incident himself and then confessing. As he reflected on the questionable methods and bribes he'd used to secure his freedom back then, Frey realized that old plan was now useless, as he'd never discovered the true culprit. Kania then suggested he could orchestrate the incident all over again. But he warned her of a new danger, the potential appearance of a real attacker if he went down that path. Kania acknowledged the system's cunning, so Frey proposed they hunt for the demons hiding around the commoners' dorms. Surprised, Kania asked why they would seek out demons instead of nobles, and Frey explained how the demons were likely using the chaos to infiltrate the empire. He described the deep-seated corruption of the empire, and how the nobles' arrogance had planted seeds of resentment among the common folk. From his explanation, Kania realized the demons could exploit this tension to sow discord and ultimately seize control. Frey then added a chilling warning: if he failed this quest, the Demon King's forces would make their move, prompting Kania to immediately suggest finding a way to identify these disguised demons. However, Frey asserted it would be an easy task if they just purchased a certain item. Later, in the dark alleys of the Empire, Frey bought what they needed and declared their preparations complete. Kania held up the demon detector he had purchased. Questioning if it would actually work, Frey explained its limits. It could detect demons below the rank of the Demon King and his commanders. He assured her the system window would flag any higher-level threats, and Kania felt a wave of relief, finding the system surprisingly helpful for once. A sentiment Frey couldn't help but agree with. He then changed the subject, asking if she had begun investigating Serena. Kania reported that she had already questioned an informant in the back alleys and intended to mobilize her shadow agents. Still, Kania admitted that she might not be able to find Serena if she was truly in hiding, and Frey agreed. He pointed out that Serena was the heir to the very family that handled all of the Empire's intelligence and assassination missions. As they continued to strategize, Frey noticed a group of homeless children nearby. He recognized them immediately as the ones once captured by the Lust Queen, Kilbus. The starving children lamented that they'd already spent the single gold coin a masked man had given them. Besides, even if they hadn't, the adults would have just stolen it from them anyway. Seeing their plight, Frey realized his own failure and decided to build an orphanage with his vast wealth. But Kania rejected the idea, warning it would blow his cover. In response, Frey showed her the lifespan measuring device he'd obtained after defeating Irina, revealing he only had about 4 to 5 years left to live. He confessed his hope to atone for his past sins by saving people like these homeless children. His words struck a chord. Flustered but moved, Kania accepted his proposal on one condition: they would build it under her name. Not long after, Kania was distributing bread to the hungry children. Meanwhile, Frey hoped this world might finally find some small measure of peace. He then remembered the imperial ball he had to attend as his father's representative, and decided to reject anyone who approached him, as he was already engaged. Meanwhile, in Klana's room at the palace, the Empress declared that an alliance between the Moonlight family and the hero would pose a grave threat to the imperial throne. But Klana saw through the deception. The Empress was truly after the Starlight family's immense fortune. Before leaving, the Empress ordered her to marry Frey at all costs, threatening to sell her off if she failed.
Trembling with despair, Klana wept, preferring to end her own life rather than be forced to marry Frey.
Back at the academy, Frey received an official letter from the Emperor, ordering him to annul his current engagement and become betrothed to Klana. Frozen in shock, Frey read the justification for the order, a second oath made 1,000 years ago between the first Emperor and the previous hero.